Hey, it's Monday, and that means Facebook questions. So I've got 5 quick questions here, and I'm going to answer them sort of in a quick summary, so you guys know exactly what's going on. If you ever want to post a question on Facebook, do it on Mondays, and I'll try to post my answers in video form by Monday evening. So here we go. I'm Wes Hagen, a vineyard manager at Clos Pepe Vineyards. First question comes from Brandon Bridge. Brandon asks, where does the name Clos Pepe come from? Clos is a French word. It's the root of the word closed. So a clos is a wall. Generally in Burgundy, a clos is a wall that surrounds an old vineyard, and it's so old that if you're an American, you have to stop and take a picture of it. It represents something ancient and important, and it reminds us that we're very young in this business and we have to be a little bit humble because even though we call ourselves Clos Pepe, we are obviously a New World winery. But Clos is just kind of the walled vineyard of a guy named Pepe. So that's where Clos Pepe comes from. We basically stole it from the French, and now that it's a French word next to an Italian last name. The next question comes from John Rodriguez, and the question is what's the difference in Pinot Noir clones? Well, I don't really believe too much in Pinot Noir clones. I think we'd be much better off if we do what the French did, which is select our Pinot Noir massively, which means we replant our vineyards by using the best adapted vines in our fields. Clonal selection means pushing the reset button and putting everything back to a clone that's kept at Foundation Plant Material Service in Davis. The problem is as soon as a grapevine goes through bud break, its new shoots are actually genetically distinct from the shoots they came out of. So there's really no such thing as a clone per se. So I'd say Americans should stop worrying about clones. Let's start thinking about developing our own wine varieties and allowing our vines to adapt in the field and selecting the vines that have adapted their best random genetic mutations, selecting those mutations to make better and better wine here in the United States. So is there a difference in Pinot Noir clones? Yes, there's the old clones, the new clones. The new Dijon clones may make a slightly richer, bigger wine. I'm not so sure about that. I think maybe it's just people letting them get riper and riper and riper. But some people say the 2A and the Swan, those are older clones, and the Martinelli clone. I'm not a big fan of thinking about what clones do. I think soil and climate are really what Pinot Noir is about. Clone is just sort of, it's a red herring. It's a trope. People like to talk about it, but it's basically meaningless to me. I think soil and climate will always trump clone. Third question comes from Heather Bedford, and she asked, how do you get the bugs out of the crusher destemmer? Well, good news, bad news. Every wine ever made had bugs in it. But the thing is we here at Clos Pepe, we pick bugs out of our picking bins. We sort the wine in the field. We pull out as many snails and bees and spiders as we can. Of course, whatever you do, you bring a natural and organic product like grapes into a winery. It's going to have some bugs in it. And if it does get crushed and it does become part of the winemaking, everything that goes to the bottom of the barrel, and we very carefully rack the clean wine off the sediment. We dump the sediment. Everything that comes in off the field that doesn't turn into pure, beautiful, lovely, and delicious wine sinks to the bottom of the barrel, and it's basically tossed into a drain or back into the field. So the answer is every wine ever made has bugs in it, except if it's made properly, none of the bugs actually come into it. If you actually find a bug in your wine, it probably flew in there. And chances are, if you find a bug in your wine, I wouldn't buy wine from that producer anymore because they're obviously not taking very good care in their racking and their filtration. Fourth question, Harvey Jordan. He heard sort of that old wines used to be where it's at, but young wines are getting better and better, and most wines created in the market today are meant for early consumption. And that's absolutely true, and this is a big influence of a French winemaker named Michel Rolland. And Monsieur Rolland is very into dissolved oxygen in young wines. He likes to actually pump and micro-oxygenate these wines to give them a little bit more fruit and a little more pop when they're young. So pleasure wines are kind of his specialty. So, I mean, if you're going to drink pleasure wine, there's no reason not drinking it when it's fresh and fruity and delicious. But if you want to lay down a wine, let it age, I think that's a whole nother story. What we do here at Clos Pepe is we minimize the amount of dissolved oxygen in the wine by bubbling inert gas through the wine before it goes through the bottling process. So it's very, very low in dissolved oxygen, which means it can age really gracefully for a very long time. If you want any of the Clos Pepe wines or any wine you drink to actually show a little bit more like in that oxygenated style, my recommendation is to decant. In fact, I recommend decanting all California wines under 3 to 5 years old. So put them in a decanter, get them nice and swirled around, get lots of air bubbles in there, open them up an hour before dinner, let them breathe, and that'll get the dissolved oxygen into the solution of the wine and allow the fruit and a lot of the more sort of delicate aromas and flavors to start emerging. So the younger you drink it, the more air it needs in a decanter. And I actually believe in decanting young white wines too. Give it some air, see how it affects your wine. It's a fun experiment to do. In fact, aerate one wine, take 2 bottles of the same wine, aerate one, don't aerate one, serve them blind and see if people even think it's the same wine. It's pretty fun stuff. So thanks for the question, Harvey. Last question, Michael Holland. I almost said Michelle Holland. Michael Holland asks, does the vineyard floor and the color and the quality of the soil influence when the grapes wake up and go through what we call bud break? Is when the bud shield pulls back and we start getting green material and we're back in the business of growing grapes for the year again. Usually happens around mid-March here in Clos Pepe. I don't think the vineyard floor has much of an influence. I mean, you could argue that if you had grass on the floor, the soil wouldn't warm up as fast. But really, the soil depth at which it's being measured by the roots and deciding when to warm up, it really waits until that lower depths begin to warm up. So even if we get an 85-degree day in February, it's not going to mean we're going to get bud break the next day. Just because we have special grasses or no grasses isn't going to affect bud break all that much. So I don't think the vineyard floor or the soil is going to affect it. What really affects bud break is the soil temperature at the base of the taproot, down maybe 2 or 3 feet. And that's why if you put a grapevine in a pot, you'll notice that grapevine in a pot will wake up a month, sometimes 2 months early, because the soil warms up in the pot and the grape doesn't really understand what's going on. It's one reason I don't recommend potting grapes. So the final answer is, the vineyard floor and the color of the dirt, it's not going to really influence bud break. What's going to influence bud break is really the temperature of the soil as it slowly warms up as spring begins to happen. So when that soil temperature hits about 55 degrees, or the 55 degrees becomes the average temperature of the day, that's about when we're going to see bud break. So Brandon, John, Heather, Harvey, Michael, thanks so much for all these questions, and we'll see you next Monday. Thanks.